Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of the show. Today, bringing really fascinating guests involved in creating a better tomorrow for many people out there. Today on the show, we have the honor of being joined by Karen Meyer Cunningham, who is a nationally recognized leader in special education advocacy, as well as the founder and chief executive officer of the Special Education Academy. This is an organization dedicated to empowering parents to navigate the complex world of special education with clarity, with confidence, and purpose. After confronting the challenges of the system firsthand as a parent, Karen transformed her experience into this mission, ultimately helping families across the country understand their rights, communicate effectively with schools, and ultimately ensure that every child receives the support and services that they're entitled to under the law. Through the Academy, Karen has built a trusted community and a practical education-based training model that bridges the gap between parents and educators. Her work emphasizes collaboration, knowledge, empowerment. She's known for her energy as well as her honesty and very engaging communication style, has become a leading voice for reform and accountability in the special education area. Karen's also an accomplished comedian on top of all that, as well as an accomplished author. Her first book, Defying Autism, was published back in 2009, and her new book, which will be out in a couple of months, is entitled The Epic IEP, Powerful Playbook for Parents, Educators, and Advocates Navigating the Special Education Process. A lot of really great topics to get into that we don't normally touch on, but honored to have her with us. Karen Meyer Cunningham, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you. Really great having you, and looking forward to getting to a lot of these themes. Would love to start off with you, though, and if you could tell us, a little bit more about your background. Obviously, what first draw you to this area, and obviously very central to your story is your son James, who was diagnosed with autism, which became sort of the compass of what everything that happens next. Would love to, if you could take some time and share James's story as well, because I think this is very important to why you wrote the recent book.
Sure. So, I had James was my first child, and I was very excited. He was born. He got a 9 on his APGAR. I don't know what that is, but I feel like it's an A student, and everything was fine. And then progressing all the milestones, all the things, and one of our trips to the pediatrician at 18 months, when he came home after getting his updated shots, he literally just transformed and lost language and had behaviors and regressed. And as a new mom and as a comedian, I was thinking, well, this will just change, and then moms go to other moms. And did you go through this? Oh, he'll outgrow it. He'll mature. It got increasingly worse. And so one of my clients at my salon said, I don't know if you know this, but if your kids are speech delayed, they could start public school at 3. I was like, fantastic. Because that's what they do at school. They help kiddos learn. So we got him evaluated, and he started school when he was 3 years old in 1 month. I'm like, this is fantastic. I bought him the Lion King backpack, the original Lion King, and I sent him across the street, and everything was going to be fantastic. And so he had lost his language at that point, a lot of stemming, a lot of very acute behaviors. He had pica. He would put anything he found in his mouth, would rock for hours. And so I was very excited and hopeful that this process was going to, fix it, because that's what we like. We like things to be fixed. And so about a month after him being in school, I won't go into the whole story, but Child Protective Services showed up at our door, which is not really what you want. And she was very aggressive, and she listed off all the things that James did. And she kept saying, "Do you think that's normal? Do you think that's normal? Do you think that's normal?" I was like, "No." And she goes, "Well, that's what your husband said too. And what are you doing about it?" I said, "We're sending him to, PPCD, preschool programs for children with disabilities." And then she left me her phone number, if I needed it, if they had to go back and take him into custody. So that was my intro into special education. And I was livid, and I did the Shirley MacLaine in terms of endearment. And I walked across the street to the school, and they all looked at me like the lunatic that I was in that moment. And we sort of talked it out, and I worked it out, and I let it go. And then lo and behold, in January, a few months later, the same investigator calls after we had been cleared. Nothing had happened. And she said, "I'm so sorry, but if somebody reports it, we have to call." And she said, you have somebody that's just a little trigger happy." And so
Mm.
at that point, the only places that my husband and I, and my two older stepdaughters went was to church and home. We couldn't take James anywhere. He wouldn't respond to us. He wouldn't stay with us. And so it wasn't hard to figure out who had called. And at that point, I took matters into my own hands, and I took my rolling cart of papers and I marched down to the Child Protective Services office. I don't recommend anybody do this. And I said, "I want to see my case manager." And the police officer that's in the building was like, "Okay." And so we take the elevator up to the person who was working on the investigation. And we opened the door, and I think she might have been 22 years old. And one day she had just graduated college. And I was like, "Do you know anything about autism?" And she goes, "I think when I was a sophomore, we had a seminar." And I was like, "Are you my leader?" But in that moment, she was the first person that ever gave me a resource. And she gave me a card for services, mental health, mental retardation of Travis County. We don't call it that anymore. But it was the first time somebody gave me a service and a support. And I thought, how odd that the first person giving me a support or a recommendation somewhere was Child Protective Services, not the campus, not the school, not the teachers. And so we started having more successful IEP meetings, and I just became obsessed with this space, with this law. I was like, "Oh my goodness, there's this law, and it
Mm.
says kids can have equity and access and a free, appropriate public education. I'm just going to go across the street. I'll just tell them. They probably don't know." And was I wrong? And so, special education, I always say it's the only federal law that's solely implemented by parents.
Right.
And this December 2nd, 2025, it will be 50 years old. And when we get it right for kids, and we get it right a lot, it changes a child's future and it gives a family hope. But when we don't get it right, it handicaps them even more. And so I started going with families, just barging my way into people's lives like I do, and helping them. And so it's just this great little amazing puzzle that if we get the IEP right, the individualized education program right, then kids flourish, right? My mission statement is when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. But there's so many moving pieces in special ed that if you've never had a child with special needs, you would think that special needs parents are literally making it up, right?
Mm.
This is America. We pay taxes, we just go across the street and it happens, and it doesn't. And so, um, I thought in the beginning, in the 90s, when I was young and still had a thyroid, I thought, well, they know what to do and they're just choosing not to do it. And it's not what's happening at all. We don't train our amazing teachers or special educators or paraprofessionals in the application of the law, the letter of the law, the purpose of the law. We train them in how to fill out software and how to fill out paperwork. And we have
Mhm.
these amazing teachers who love kids and are doing the best that they know how to do, but nobody trains anybody. And so I would assume, just like you would, if you go to a guy that changes oil for a living, he's probably had some training in oil changing, right? You would assume that a special education teacher is trained by their district every year in special education. And I found out that I was completely wrong. And
Mm.
so that sort of birthed my journey.
Mhm.
And thanks to the pandemic, it's just exploded with social media and serving families. And it's the most amazing call I could ever think of.
Mm. Outstanding. Outstanding. Yeah, I particularly like the anecdote at the beginning of the new book, sort of the well enough response that you got. That he was doing well enough. And you were like, no, that's not exactly what I want to hear at
Yeah,
this point. And I thought that was kind of, kind of really intriguing that educators would, that's sort of the epitome of
it's
how they were
fine.
responded
Yeah,
to you. But yeah, I mean, Karen, I'd love if you could we could take some time to walk through some of these terms because we have not, our audience has not been exposed to them, and you're the first guest that we've had in this area. So if you could bear with me for a bit, but I'd like to start off, and we talk about IEP and individual
yeah,
education program, which you point out is distinctly different than something known as a 504 plan.
yeah.
One is related to the Individuals with Disability Education Act, the other, the Rehabilitation Act. And there's a lot of difference in terms of the law, the purpose, the eligibility, and so forth. Take a little time and walk us through what these two plans are
Yeah, so
specifically.
a 504 plan was never meant to be the way it is used in schools. So a 504 plan is for an American that has an identified disability. And based on that disability, they can't be denied their civil right of accommodation. So whether you're in school, whether you're 30 years old at a job, anywhere, right? If you're at the airport, you cannot be denied your needed accommodations based on the acuity of your disability. So a 504 plan um, is very small and it's really just a list of accommodations. And usually, when you look at a 504 plan, that's exactly what teachers would do anyway. I don't have to have a plan to go, will you check for understanding? Of course you are. Most of it's just really good teaching, right? Both of these require an identified disability, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, so we would say a 504 plan is you have a disability and you're in need of accommodations to be successful at school. And so an IEP, an individualized education program, means that you need accommodations at school, but you also need services and supports. And so really for me, special education plan is just coaching, right? All of our kids are on a state level required to have an education, and special education is just a little bit more than the general ed teacher could solely do by herself, right? So both my boys are athletes. We had private coaches. Nobody would think that's unusual. It's a little more coaching in special education. And so, but a special education program is going to be between $2,000 and $5,000 a year for a school district. A 504 plan, say it with me, is $0. And so there's often a push to parents to, you want the, I mean, you don't want that in your file, do you? You don't want special ed on his record. And, I'm knocking on 60. I have never seen anybody in the world walking around with their record. Have y'all seen that? And so people that have been given the gift of persuasion sometimes use it for manipulation. And so I'm out there to protect the rights of parents. And I know why these conversations go on because there's a cost, there's staffing, and sometimes my position is that I don't believe that we see kids with disabilities with the same value. I always say that our kids are rarely a school board meeting photo op. And that might be a little hard, but it's true. And I
Mm-hmm.
was one of those people before I had a child that struggled. I grew up in the 70s and you got it together and you pulled up your bootstraps and you just power through, right? And I didn't know anybody in my life ever with a disability. I never struggled in school. Allegedly, I struggled and I talked too much. I don't know what that's about, but I never had any problems academically, functionally, behaviorally, emotionally at school. And so special education is not a dirty word. It's just necessary, right? We are not all in the 50th percentile. We do not all understand everything the same way. And
Mm-hmm.
so the part of the division is that if you and I have a child that plays tennis and something goes on with the tennis coach, we are down at the field house this afternoon and handling, right? Special education is its own beast, right? Because if all of us had an 8-year-old boy with autism and a speech impairment, they're all very different characteristics and they show up differently. So we are a very disconnected community because most people with a child with a disability, they're trying to get through Tuesday, right? 88% of parents that have a child with a disability get divorced, right? And there's shame that comes with it. And, sometimes family members are embarrassed and not supported. If I had a child in a wheelchair, there is a level of compassion versus if I have a child who's just in the middle of Costco on the floor yelling, right? And it's
Right.
hard for us as humans, mostly me and everybody else, to have compassion for something we haven't walked through, right? It's just an unknown, right? And so my heart is to share what I believe is good news. And if it changes or helps one person, then that's everything for me. Um, and I would think that after 50 years, we would have more services for families and schools, but we just don't. And so my heart is to equip everybody. When I first started Special Education Academy, I assumed it would be for parents of kids with disabilities. And I'm very honored and blessed to say that 75% of the people that I train are school employees. And not because I'm anybody special, but because they want the training, right? And it's not available. Even if you type in right now special education training, you can go to college for special education or their law books, right? And so it's not helpful. And, unfortunately, in special education, it's a learn as you go. But unfortunately, that could penalize the child with a disability because everybody at the table is learning as they go. And so I always recommend that children have an IEP, a full testing for an IEP. And the testing does one of two things: it identifies or eliminates, and we want both. And then that will tell you the level of support that they need based upon their identified disability.
Yeah, that's it's very important because I was headed there next, and again, just again for the audience, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, we talked about autism spectrum disorder, but there's many other things that take part. So deafness, blindness, various types of emotional disturbances, and then a big category of multiple disabilities when you, I guess, get more than one. And you're, a major proponent of getting a comprehensive evaluation done. And these evaluations, they're not simple. I mean, they evaluate everything from speech, sociological development, medical, physical, full cognitive evaluation. Take a look at what's involved in this, because just reading through the list here, it's comprehensive, but it has to be
Right.
done.
Yeah, sure. So if you and I went to the hospital and we were having chest pains, we wouldn't say to the doctor, just check for cholesterol. We would want them
Right.
to do what? A full panel to rule things in and rule things out. So the full initial individualized evaluation, the first time you're evaluated, has 8 areas. So you would be evaluated for speech, you'd be evaluated for sociological, medical, physical, a full psychological evaluation to see if you had any behavioral emotional needs, related services, adaptive behavior, a full cognitive profile to include all 7 Gs, and then formal achievement, because all of those things occur during an instructional day. And so we need to know the best way to educate a child. And so we can look at their strengths in those profiles and their needs, and then intervene where we need to. What's working, we fan. And what is a critical area of need, we write goals and objectives and give them specialized instruction around that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just sort of it's sort of the roadmap for this kiddo for 36 instructional weeks, which would be a year, to be successful. And so it is involved, and it takes many evaluators, and it's investment in the school. And, without those comprehensive evaluations, we miss things. And so I do about 500 IEP meetings a year. And when we get what we call an opening packet, myself or one of my teams, the first thing that we look at is, because you got to start at the beginning, was the evaluation appropriate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a kiddo today, and he's in 8th grade, and he was evaluated when he was 8. So it would be like, and that's what we do in schools, right? We teach and we measure, we teach and we measure. And if we don't have current appropriate data, we cannot make good decisions. We make decisions on one 4-letter word in special education: data. That's it. And unfortunately, sometimes we're going off of feelings or perceptions, and the data should drive all the outcomes in the IEP, so that they can have post-secondary success, right? They will have gainful employment, independent living, and further education. Those same 3 things that we want for all of our kiddos, right? And so when Gerald Ford, in December 2nd, 1975, signed into the law, Educating All Handicapped Children Act, because before that, kids with disabilities didn't come to school. And that's not very long ago, 1975. So before that, if you had a child with a disability, you just didn't go, they didn't go to school. And so he signed in this act, which then turned into just the IDEA. It's the same, rules and laws. He said this is a very complex system that will need federal funding, and it's very detailed and complex. And for probably the thing that's the most detailed and complex in public schools, we don't train our staff to do it comprehensively as teams. If you go into an IEP meeting and we log on, there'll be the speech pathologist and the music therapist and the special education teacher and the principal. They're not meeting together, sitting down, talking about this. They're doing back to back to back meetings. And so we have people giving information in what I call silos, right? The speech pathologist sees this, and you're the PE teacher and you see that. So I feel like my job is to take educator wisdom, parent passion, and then move them to the middle and write this comprehensive, epic IEP that will change student outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Let's Karen, if you would, I'd like to talk just a little bit more about because you're essentially just talking about it. The acronym is PLOP, stands for Present Level of Academic Achievement and Functional Performance. And as you were saying, in the case of sort of the 8-year-old evaluation, or someone might be 13 now, this is all about students' current ability, the challenges, the current needs to answer, how is the student now, not
Right.
then. And you also, you go through a lot of the other plot pitfalls, which I gotta, a kick out of some of these. One specifically, which kind of the data dump plot, which is basically where they give you this huge report, the 15th percentile here and the 27th percentile there. It kind of reminded me, I tell a story on the show a lot about my father-in-law's cancer treatment, where he was given this really comprehensive report of all the genes and this and that were wrong in this tumor. All he wanted to do was get therapy and stay alive. He didn't need this report. Talk about some of these plot pitfalls, because I think they're kind of interesting. And
there's a saying, and I am not a teacher, I'm not an attorney, God bless teachers that they take our children all day. That's amazing, right? But we have the present levels should tell me how the student's disability impacts him across settings, right? Mm-hmm. And we have a tendency to put in grades, which we all know everybody has an A now, and the state tests and this and that, and he's well groomed and he's not paying attention. I should be able to pick up these present levels of academic achievement and functional performance and go, oh, that's Billy. This is what he needs. And we have these, I just got a new client and her paperwork was, say it with me, 81 pages long. There's a saying that only teachers can take something simple and make it complicated, right? And I'm not going to read 81 pages, and it's written in these acronyms and the BIP and the PCS and the UDL and the BI, and everybody's just looking at you. They don't even know what it means. So my job is to kind of lean out that document. What are his eligibilities? What are those 13 federal eligibilities? And an eligibility is not a label. Labels go on boxes. They are an identification, right? That's all they are. And so that eligibility opens the door for services, right? And so we take those evaluations, and then every year we look at his present level. So we get the biology teacher's input and World Geo and the football coach and the pediatrician and the speech pathologist. And we put that together to see this child. And so most PLAFs are pitiful, and PLAFs need to be pristine, prescriptive, and puffy. And if you don't know what puffy is, you could just look at my hairdo in Texas. It should be so comprehensive that you and I could stand at the back of a room and go, yep, oh, I see him. And so if I can't see him in that paperwork, then I can't serve him, right? And so when I tell you our files are 2 and 3 and 4 inches big and paperwork, this and that, most people are sitting in meetings just sort of glazed over, right? And they're teachers and they're going to go teach to their best ability. But this is your IP. This is the student's exact longitude and latitude. If somebody can explain it to you in a way that's understandable for me, the college dropout, and whoever's a doctor in the room. And so that's one of the things that I think that I'm really good at, is explaining the components in a way that you can feel it. If you don't feel what I'm saying, you're probably not going to understand the need for it. So we're talking about standardized tests. So let's say that We did a cognitive profile on your son, and his short-term memory was an 87. Well, you're thinking, this is good. He is a B student. Well, 87 is the 17th percentile.
Mm.
Nobody says that. We just, like you were saying for your father, we just go through these numbers and we'll
Right.
go, do you have any questions about this section? And the parents are like, no, I don't have any questions about anything. And so my job is to explain, hey, you're his new teacher. His short-term memory is in the 17th percentile. Your IQ, which is those brain skills, are stabilized at 10. So whatever my brain skills were at 10, they are my brain skills today at 59. And they tell us how kids acquire learning, right? If you have deficits in short-term memory, you're going to have to what? Repeat yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to say, Billy, go get your soccer ball, your backpack, and walk the dog. He didn't hear the two other things, right? And so my job is to say, listen, when you're teaching him, slow down your prosody, slow down your cadence, and then give him one directive. And then when he's done with that, give him the next directive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really, if we had these evaluations for every child, then my 3 adult children would be in therapy as adults, right? Because it's how you're cooked. It is how you're cooked, right? And so my job is to take these very smart people who did all of these evaluations and explain it to the committee so that it's not a data dump, but that describes a story of what he needs. And
Mm-hmm.
so parents will say, well, nobody's ever told me that, right? A lot of our kiddos that struggle, they struggle with fluid reasoning, and we always test for that. So fluid reasoning is that ability with automaticity to know what to do next in a novel situation. And so you and I go out to lunch, we're sitting down, water comes gushing into the baseboard. We don't just go, let's move to the patio. Even though that's never happened to us, we get up, we find the manager, and we take them back to the area of need, and then we move on. Kiddos with low fluid reasoning are the ones that you walk around the corner and they are standing in the milk. And you say, why are you just standing there? Right? They learn by experience, but they don't intuitively know what to do next. And so, how does that show up in a classroom? Well, you've put him in a group project. He didn't know to turn in his paper to the leader of his group when he was done. He's never had that experience. I tell a story about my son, James, who's amazing and fully recovered and a grown man and amazing. And when he was getting his driver's license, which is a very big deal, we had practice and practice and practice. And I said, now listen, James, when you get in there, you do whatever she says. Yes, ma'am, I know, right? And so nothing more important than parallel parking for a driver's license in Texas, right? So he parallel parks, and I'm like, yes, and he drives off. And it comes back in about 5 or 10 minutes, however long the driving test is. And he has lower fluid reasoning. And he'd never gone through this experience. And so he comes back, and the lady with her clipboard is kind of scratching her way out of the window of the car. And I'm thinking, this is probably not a good sign, right? And then she runs across the parking lot. And so I very calmly said, James, how did your driving test go? He goes, well, you said do what she said. I was like, yes. He goes, well, I was driving. She's really quiet. And then she would point with her clipboard. And she just all of a sudden said, your turn was back there. And he said, which is the way you raise the children correctly, yes, ma'am, stopped in the turn lane and backed up 100 yards on a 5-lane road. Did he do what she said? He did, right? And so there's so much, learning that happens, and you're supposed to know what I said, even though I didn't say it, right? It's raining cats and dogs. It's actually not, right? What's funny? Nothing. Then why are you laughing, right? And so when I explain that to a committee, kiddos that have low fluid reasoning, they might pick friends that aren't so good for them. They might be the ones going, I'm holding this for Bob, right? And so we help teachers understand those very specific data points in a way that's useful for them in their classroom this year with this student.
So again, just to sum for the audience, IEPs need to be individualized. They can't be generic. We have to have a baseline that then progresses from year to year. And ultimately, it's something that parents, teachers, specialists, so forth can all pass around and be on the same page.
Yeah.
With that being said, can you take us into maybe a couple non-James stories about successes where there was a really crappy plot that was done
Yeah.
and you ironed it out, or maybe just one
Yeah.
from the beginning, whatever.
Yeah. And
Cases
it's,
that you
and
can talk about.
yeah. And here's the thing, the paperwork is just a starting place, right?
Cool.
And everything can be, revised, reviewed, and edited in the meeting. I was in a IEP meeting a year ago in a rural state, and it said, I told them, because I'm a teller, you need to beef up the present levels. They're lean. And she said, okay. And I got the present levels back in my email, and it said, she's really good at math and she likes pigs. Oh, did she have a pig deficit in her evaluation? And so the present levels, when we get them right, it changes outcomes for kiddos, right? Um, Sometimes I get present levels and you can really tell how the teachers perceive the student, right? And all of us have biases, right? You and I are sitting somewhere and somebody walks up that weighs 600 pounds. We have a ticker tape in our head of how they got there, right? We all have biases.
Sure.
And when we have kiddos with what I call invisible disabilities, right? There's no white cane. You can't visually see that there's something that's not in the normed range. They're not in a wheelchair. Um, we just think sometimes they can just get it together, right? And so the stuff that I've read in present levels, I had a kiddo one time and it said, when he's in a good mood, he works. I said, well, a disability is not a motivation issue, right?
Mm.
And so I help people take out, we all have biases, so that we don't go, oh, did you get Billy? Yeah, this is going to be a great year, right? And so I change the language so that we can understand it and kids can feel celebrated, right? Because often the present levels is the list of everything that's wrong with them and every deficit. And while that is a requirement under the law, you're not a complete deficit. You don't have any skills. You don't have any areas of strength. And so we need to rewrite the present levels to see what's going on with this kiddo right now. The law says that we are charged with writing an IEP, the plan, to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of their circumstances. And so my job is to get rid of all the data dump and really describe his circumstances. What are your circumstances? What's going on at home? Did parents get divorced? You're struggling with your language. You are, you're not socially the same age as your other seventh grade friends. All of that are your unique circumstances, not just reading, writing, and math. And then the IEP is for academic need. So often I'll sit in meetings and they'll go, well, we don't need to write present levels because he doesn't have any academic deficits. So everything that happens in the human experience, we can write a goal around it, right? Somebody taught me algebra, I think. Somebody can teach you social skills, but we think kids should just have social skills. They should just have appropriate language. They should just have appropriate behaviors, and they don't, right? And when they don't, often we tell them to do what? Stop it right now, right? And that's great. He probably wants to stop it, but just like we taught you algebra, I can teach you appropriate behaviors. And so we have one job in special education, to teach a child with a disability strategies to self-manage their disability. That's it. We're not trying to make it go away. We're not trying to fix them because they're not broke. And please don't say that we're closing gaps. We don't close gaps, but we teach them ways to navigate life and mitigate those barriers.
Absolutely. Talking about navigating life, many barriers, clearly, from what I remember, I haven't been in school for a while, but here we are in 2025 in this era of all sorts of tech, online classes, artificial intelligence. We got this term neurodiversity, which you hear a lot about now the last couple of years. Talk a little bit about sort of, the future of some of this, where you see innovation, where you see some of these technologies taking us. What don't you like? What are you concerned about? What do you think is interesting? Take us a little bit down the sort of the tech and innovation path here.
Yeah, so the Assistive Technology Act of 1988 is a federal act for all Americans. It talks about assistive technology devices, and assistive technology services. It's great. You should read it. And we love assistive technology. When I was in high school, I was like, one day I will have enough money to buy an Encyclopedia Britannica. Remember that? Well, you're probably not that old,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And like, I was going to get it, not my sister. So we wouldn't say, hey, can you look something up in a dictionary? We have technology that speeds up access to things, and that's great. The flip side of that, since the pandemic, is almost every kid in America is shoved in front of a Chromebook now. So, over 40 years ago, the Pediatric Association said that minors should not look at a screen for more than 60 minutes a day.
Mm.
Good thing none of us are doing that, right? And so, um, the problem with technology as it relates to instruction for a child with a disability is that it can't be specialized. So, special education requires SDI, specially designed instruction. And you can have the greatest reading program, you can have the greatest math program online, but you can't individualize it. It's a general ed product, right? So that we have to be cautionary with. And then also my boyfriend, Chat GPT, which helps me when I fire off emails,
Oh, yeah.
can very much see now when we get documents in an IEP meeting. It's pretty obvious when it comes from Chat GPT. So certainly use Chat GPT. Like, let's say that you're trying to write a math computation goal, then put that in Chat GPT, but then individualize it based upon his current critical areas of need.
Mm-hmm.
But we have so much technology that's so good for kiddos. We have electronic braille. We have, I have kiddos that don't have use of their arms, have never spoken, or their legs, and they use an eye gaze device to literally communicate. It's just amazing. But if you don't give them access to these supports, services, and technology, they won't learn in that modality, right? And so children with disabilities are the most expensive child in a public school, but I believe all of our kids are RA. They're ridiculously amazing. And so when we give them the supports that they need to be successful, they flourish. And so we need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about, you've taken us through a lot of the laws here and different bills and so forth over the last couple of decades. Clearly, we're in a very odd time right now. I'm here in Philly, and Washington's right an hour and a half down that way. Can you talk a little bit about things that are going on? I mean, I don't, not sure. I mean, I hear a lot of it, obviously, about autism spectrum disorder from Health and Human Services, but
Yeah.
clearly, a lot of where you are hanging out is per the Department of Education, and I don't know what the
Yeah.
layoff
So
situation is there, but
sure. So we were literally going back to DC this next week. Obviously, they're out of the office right now, so we're not going this
yeah.
time. I've been 4 times in the last year working with senators and Congress people. And the first problem is that we never fully funded IDEA. So IDEA was to be funded at 40%, and it's funded around 8 to 11%. That being said, we need a different system before we just throw more money at it, right? The federal government does not oversee states. States do not oversee districts, and districts do not oversee their campuses in reality. It sounds good, but it doesn't. If there was special education police, I would be getting a jacket and a little shiny badge. There is no special education police. So we need to have, one of the things that we're working on passing at the state and federal level is an enforcement mechanism or a sanction for districts or states or superintendents that don't fulfill their IDEA obligations. And so IDEA is a federal act. It's a grant program. It's a grant program. So if you write a grant, if you're a teacher, you write a grant for a library, well, you can't use that money for a football field, right? So this grant money is delivered to the 50 states, and it's to be used for kids with disabilities. And it doesn't always happen like that. As for what's happening in the government, what I can say is I've never seen in 50 years of special education either party do anything for special ed. Like literally nothing has happened in funding IDEA for 50 years. So it's not a party issue. Disabilities don't care if you're Republican, liberal, Democrat. They don't care, right? And every person that we meet with on the Hill, they're on board. They have a child. They have a nephew. Nobody doesn't know somebody. And politicians run on education, all this, but it ends up just going to the bottom of the pile because something is more important in government. So I'm going to keep ringing this bell, whoever's in the building, till we get it right for kiddos. We can, right? Um, but it's one of those things because we haven't seen it done successfully. I think it's hard for us to imagine fixing it, right? And we're good at throwing money at things. As it relates to, the Department of Education, there are U.S. Department of Education oversees 13 offices, 13 different offices.
Right.
And I would love to tell you that there's a sheriff at the Department of Education. There's not. You know what they should have? They should probably have a gift shop. The Department of Education, and I'm going to say this the nicest way I know, doesn't do anything. They don't teach a child. They don't enforce federal laws. They are the distributor of funds, whether they're part A, B, C, or D. I wish there was somebody at the Department of Education that I could call and go, "Hey, we're having a problem in Santa Fe, New Mexico." The part of the government that is an enforcement mechanism for us is the Office of Civil Rights. So that is under the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights.
Okay.
But that has a very small purview
Sure.
as it relates to kids with disabilities. So those investigations are usually around accommodations, because remember, the accommodation is the civil right. And so I've learned how to navigate that. But the Office of Civil Rights, to say that they're slow would be an understatement. I have probably at any point 100 investigations opened, and they're federal attorneys. But the oldest one that I have open was from October 2021. The child has graduated. So whether it's a Republican president or a Democrat president, it is slow, slow, slow. As my dad would say, in the government, they don't work on commission, right? I don't know how you fix any of that. But IDEA is a federal act. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is a federal act. The Americans with Disabilities Act from 1990 is a federal act. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to go away. Education is a state issue. You do not have a federal right to a general education. Special education is a federal mandate. And so I would love for the Individualized Disabilities Education Act to move over to the Department of Justice, because I believe when you're denied your civil rights, that's a justice issue. It's not an education issue. But good news is I have decided I will never run for office because I found out that you cannot take aerosols of hairspray into the buildings. So love you, but I can't be in office. So I don't know if making the Department of Education busier and bigger or smaller will change anything, but somebody has to be guarding the hen house. So a few years ago in Texas, we got into a little bit of trouble with the federal government because we had put an invisible cap on kids with disabilities at 8.5%. 2016, U.S. Department of Education comes into all of these town hall meetings and gives us all 180 seconds to speak. And I did. And we thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be the change. This is going to be the change. And everybody goes back to their office, whether it's a state office, county office, or federal office. And we send little letters. Dear Texas, did you get it together? And then Texas sends a letter back. We go back and forth. We're dinged for $33 million. And then we were fined for $237 million. Okay, fix the problem. And there's nobody fixing the problem. It's just, it's talked about. It sounds good. But as it relates to public education for kids between the ages of 3 and 22 with disabilities, there has been no movement in 50 years. You would think that if it wasn't going right, there's somebody you can contact and somebody's going to be in trouble. No. And so while we have the right legally to have due process and have dispute resolution options when our kiddos' plans aren't being worked on, a due process hearing for a parent is $30,000, just money. And you get a hearing officer. It's not like what you see on TV, right? It's not HBO. You get an administrative hearing officer. It's very hard for parents to prevail. They often lean on the side of the education agencies. And we don't want to file. We don't want to do that. We just want to work together. And so, my job I feel like my job is to help us realize that we're all on the same side of the table. Often people will say we're on different sides of the table. We're not. It's the side of the child. And
Hmm.
so when we all are better informed, I believe we all could make better decisions. And I believe that this powerful playbook that is my life's work is going to be such a resource for anybody that sits at the special ed table.
Hmm. And speaking about people sitting at that table, Karen, I've seen you done some presentations on burnout,
Yeah.
specifically with special education teachers, and I was like sort of going through some of this information before the show, and it was like this 60% plus dangerous level of emotional exhaustion, 40% meeting criteria for one or more mental illnesses, at much higher rates than the normal sample.
Right.
Could you just say a couple words about what you're seeing in terms of the special education teachers and what we can do about the mental health burnout
Yeah.
for them?
So it's so many pieces, right? The most marginalized population requires the most emotional, physical, and intellectual input from that
Mhm.
adult providing them services.
Right.
The rise of identified disabilities is just crazy, right? In this, just for autism, in the 70s, I think it was 1 in 15,000. Now, depending on who you ask, it's 1 in 30. That is an insane increase. And why the increases are there, I guess, is because we have more identification, right? So that need surpasses the general ed population.
Mm.
And we put teachers in classrooms. And the only reason I know this is because I train the teachers and I train them every week, every year, every day. We put out 52 pieces of content every day across 7 platforms. And I've never had any teacher say, "Oh, I've been trained in all of that." I mean, the federal law is that, I mean, the handbook is almost an inch and a half, right? And we just say, "Oh my gosh, you're doing such a good job with kiddos. You're going to be in this classroom." And we just put them in classrooms. You wouldn't have a math teacher teaching math if they were a language arts teacher, right? That's a
Right.
requirement. But there are really no requirements other than getting your certification to work with kids with exceptionalities, with disabilities. And those teachers who I love are asking their principals for help. They're telling their principals they need assistance. And I mean, you can watch it. There's a great podcast, Board Teachers, and they'll say, "Have you ever asked the teacher, send the child to the office and the principal gives them a snack and sends them back?" So we're just playing hot potato instead of supporting our most important employees, the employees on the front line teaching children. And if you don't equip them, then they're not going to be successful. And so I think the other problem with the teaching model, and I didn't know about this till a few years ago, I call it the golden handcuffs. It's called the TRS, the teacher retirement system. You should do a
Okay.
whole training on that.
Okay.
Is once you're in, you don't get out. So let's say you and I both work at Dell Computers and we're like, we're going to go work somewhere else. We're going to be swimwear models, right? Well, you would get whatever you invested. It doesn't work that way in the teacher retirement system. You have to stay till like 30 or 40 years. So a lot of teachers are just buying time and they lose that money, that those savings, all of those pieces. And so and then people in schools are while they're very connected, they're very disconnected, right? It's the first grade teachers or the math teachers, and we're just not properly supporting them. I mean, they're serving our most important population, our future, right? And what
Hmm.
do teachers get? 5 days. You and I come in, we get our bulletin board, we get our baseball shirt that says "Go Bobcats" and
Hmm.
high five. We're going to crush it. That is not equipping the saints, right? These are serving our babies, and we need to teach them. And I love sports because I'm in Texas and it's a state law, and I love coaches, but I don't see any school district in America short on a single coach. Not one. I don't see any school district in America short on AP teachers. I don't see any school district in America short on principals. And we've got to fix that. The ratio of admin to teachers it's upside down now. We used to have so few administrators. We've got so many people at the admin building. We need to have more people on the ground teaching our kiddos and serving teachers, right? they should have a place to go, hey, I need a break, I need support, and we send somebody in. And so we have to pay them. I mean, what they're paid is embarrassing. You could deliver sandwiches and make more money than most teachers. I think the average teacher in Louisiana makes $31,000 a year. The average teacher in Florida is 52,000. I mean, that wouldn't even pay for my hairspray, right? And they're giving their lives for our children. And so we've got to fix that. We have to support them, and we have to listen to them, and we have to act on when they tell us they have a need in the classroom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Karen, as I mentioned at the beginning, and in addition to all of this, you are also an accomplished stand-up comedian. Clearly, in the short period of time we've been here together, you are obviously extremely good at merging humor together with very intense emotional topics. Could you just say a couple words about your career as a comedian? Are you still? I mean, people can go out and we'll put links, obviously, to
Yeah.
your
So,
stand-up, but
if you don't have a sense of humor, this is going to be a long life, right? Because I mean, I am perfect, and then I run into people every day, right? It's never me. And so I've been doing stand up professionally for 37 years. And, sitting in an IEP meeting is hard. And today I had, between your fine show, I had 6 IEP meetings from California to Sea to Shining Sea. And I always interject some comedy. I had a lady and she was like, I can't find your name on the signature page. She wasn't happy I was in the meeting. I have no idea why. And she said, I don't know what it's under. I said, it's probably under swimwear model. She goes, that's not funny. It actually is, right? And so our job in special ed is to talk about uncomfortable truths in a way that people keep listening. And so the great thing about comedy is it brings levity, right? We are more alike by our challenges than our championships, right? And so I love comedy. I love making people laugh. I get tough phone calls all day long from schools, from attorneys and parents. And, there is a deficit in hope in special education if you work in the field, if it's your child. And so, one of the things about this great book, it's a book of hope.
yeah.
And I want people to remember that it's not about your why, it's about your who. Who are you serving? You're serving a child that absolutely needs you to be their lifeline. And so I hope that this book re-injects joy and hope and possibility for all of us serving kiddos with differences.
Outstanding. Outstanding. The book will be out in a couple months at all major booksellers. One last thing we'll have you, Karen. Anything else coming up that we should know about in terms of the Academy as we get into this latter part of 2025, get ready for 2026, and then conferences, other sort of public-facing initiatives that you're going to be involved in that we should know about, and anything that I missed while we have you today, please.
Yeah, I mean, so we have training at any kind of level that you need. We have a weekly, the Epic IEP Academy. So that's once a week. We train for an hour on federal laws, the application of the laws, and then we open up for questions because you need this professional development every 7 days. We have 2-day intensives where we train you to be an advocate. We have masterminds where we train you to be a full-time advocate. And right now with the book, the epic-iep.com, you can find it. You go there, you can pick your book fulfillment, and then you come back and put in your information, and it will release $500 worth of free bonuses for people that pre-order the book. Nice. And then that will also come with February 5th, a week after the book is published. We'll have a 6-hour live summit for the book as well. So we are so happy to get this in hands of people because there's nothing more exciting than when I'm out in public and somebody comes up to me and says, I did what you said, I did the 8 hours, and now my child's getting the services they need, right? And so we're all on the same team. And obviously I do professional development. I speak at national conferences to really, we take this technical thing and we made it in a way that people can understand. And I believe it's going to bring a level of excitement because people will know they can be successful at doing this. So they're already successful at loving our kids, but this is going to give them a level of expertise that they've never had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we will put a link to the book in the show notes. And again, for everybody out there that's going to be listening to this episode of the show across the various podcast networks, or who will be watching on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Karen Meyer Cunningham, founder and chief executive officer, Special Education Academy, doing really amazing work to empower parents to navigate this extremely complex world of special education. Karen, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule today to walk us through all these topics. Thank you for everything you do there at the Academy. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for so many people via what you do.
Thank you.
Really great having you on the show today.
Thank you, dear.